Hi everyone, my name is Natalie Dawson. Welcome to Leader Talk. This show is proudly brought to you by Brainiact. Each week we are meeting with incredible leaders from around the world to discuss all things leadership and business insights. Each person coming on this talk show has given up their valuable time for one very clear purpose: to give back to small and medium business owners. Now, many of us will agree that creating a great brand for our business will no doubt help us build a profitable business. The tough question is, though, as small and medium business owners, how much do we need to spend on branding to create this great brand that will help us grow our business? So today, my co-host, CEO of Pierlite, Gustav, Arianto, and I are fortunate to chat to our guest speaker, Dan Ratner, founder and CEO of Uberbrand. For over 20 years, Dan has been working with well-known Australian brands across a variety of sectors to develop their brands by connecting customer insights with brand objectives. And today, Dan is here to help us understand the power of branding and how we can all use branding to grow profitable businesses. Welcome to the show, Dan.
Thanks, Natalie. Hi, Gus. How are you?
Hello, Dan. Thank you for donating your time for our audience all over the world, Mike.
Thanks, Gus. Thanks.
Thank you, Dan. We're looking forward to chatting with you. But before we begin, we've got two fun questions that we want to ask you. We ask these questions to all our guests. So the first one for you is, where will we find you when you're not at work?
It's an interesting question to ask me at this moment in time, actually, because very recently I acquired a place up in the Blue Mountains. So you're going to find me in the Blue Mountains in my mid-century modern abode. to a point where my wife is saying, I'm not finding you at home at all. I'm finding you away.
Oh, wow.
Oh, you're not in Blue Mountain with your wife.
So I'd like it to come up a little bit more. We also have
I think then I will know the answer to your next question. Are you a city person, mountains, country, or beach person?
I used to think I was a beach person, but over the last couple of weeks, I found that I'm definitely a mountains person.
Wow, so cold. Is it not cold there at the moment?
It's beautiful. It's actually not that high up into the mountains, only about halfway up. The weather's very, very temperate. It's not too hot. It's not too cold. The mornings are a little bit colder than Sydney, but the weather, actually, last week when I was up there, it was warmer there than it was on the eastern side. So It was actually quite...
And is it the peacefulness that has attracted you there? It's different.
It's different. It's slower. Things don't move at the same rate as they do in the city. I call the mountains time. Everybody just works on their own time and rate and speed. Yeah. Nobody's in a rush. It's fantastic.
That's what I need before coming to the weekend, right?
Exactly.
I know we're all thinking of going there right now, right, Gus?
I'm thinking of going there right now as well.
Oh, it sounds lovely.
I tell you, that's what we talk about. We're talking about brand. We haven't even talked about the brand, and Dan already want us to go to Blue Mountain by listening to the way he described living in the mountain.
That's right. We'll all go together. It'll be wonderful. We'll spend the whole weekend just listening to the rustling of the trees and the birds. It's fantastic.
It does sound lovely. And Dan, before we go into our questions and discuss, all things leadership and business strategy, we wanted to ask if you can introduce yourself. Tell us a bit more about yourself and about Uberbrand, so our audience understands who you are and also knows a bit more about Uberbrand.
No worries. So I'm Dan. I established this agency called Uberbrand about 11 years ago in 2011. I created the agency on the basis, actually from a frustration, which was I've always been a brand consultant or a brand researcher. So I'd do a piece of market research and help an organization define their brand strategy. And then I'd get a frustration when I would go and brief a design company or a creative company to bring that brand to life. So I always thought, what would happen if we brought the two things together? So we worked really hard at Uberbrand, which is what we do, at bringing brand strategy to life through creative and communications executions. So that's very much what it was about. So that's what's inspired the company. That's what we've done. And over the last 10 or 11 years, we've helped lots and lots of businesses to really define who they are, what they stand for, and why. And then once we get that on a growth trajectory, we've seen some of those guys grow up into multi-billion-dollar organizations. Lots of financial services companies have done this. Companies like Gustav have done this. Other companies that we've worked with, we set them up really nicely, and you just see them go on a really lovely growth trajectory once they've understood who and what they are and who they're for. Hope that answered that.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
It is. And, we do want to ask you a few leadership questions. We've heard you are a great leader yourself. So leadership itself, Dan, what does that mean to you?
Look, leadership. I don't really think that much about it. I think in the end of the day, we have teams that we work with, and we all have teams that we work with and people that we work with. So I don't really think about it in terms of that person's a leader, that person isn't a leader. Everybody has a role to play. Personally, I like to, lead as part of the team or be part of the team. There's very little examples when I'm not involved personally in projects that I work on or that we work on. I just don't see it as there's a leader or there isn't a leader. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I mean, what I've seen as a consequence of this, right, is it gives people the opportunity to experience things, to learn things, and to grow on their own. We operate with 3 key values as an agency, and they're my values, and they're passion, respect, and belief. So it's passion for the business, it's respect for each other, and it's belief that you can do it. I think what sits at the heart of that is this idea that you can fake it till you make it. But if you do fake it till you make it a couple of times, the first time you're faking it, the second time you're making it, the third time you're an expert. So if I can let my team work that way and learn that way, then they will start to grow and you'll see them grow. And I've seen lots of people come through the agency and grow through this agency and go to different places and do amazing things. So that's probably...
I want to ask you, so I know the question is about what's leadership mean to you. And the way I captured this is, you simply say that leadership is about being a team who facilitate an environment who can make people do, learn, and grow together for the best outcome. And then you said at the end, and hopefully when they move to, I can't exactly what you say, and hopefully when they move to other agency, they can do a good job. Hey, I don't hear this too often, but you invest in people, you put all your time, and you still wish that your team member can find a better success, whether inside or outside your business. That alone, I see that as a leadership. But what's the impact to your business, though, if all your great people moving on, working and opening similar business to you?
Well, they don't necessarily open similar businesses to me. I have to say the barriers to entry here are not that easy. It's not it's not, and these days it's difficult to open an agency and start an agency and build credibility and have people want to work with you. It's not something that you can just open. So I do see that some of my people will outgrow working in this agency, or they'll want to become something else or try something else or learn other parts of strategy. See, strategy, the definition of that strategy piece that we do is quite defined at Uberbrand. It's very much around defining who and what an organization is. But when you talk about strategy in the world of marketing and communications, it's a different type of thing. It's about who's your customer, how do you reach them, and how do you put advertising into market. That's a different discipline. So what I see is a lot of people learn a discipline around definition, and then they take that definition and then they'll apply that definition into marketing, which might be at other agencies. So that's when they get involved in bigger budgets. So they get involved with media budgets and that sort of stuff. So it becomes media planning. So I see a lot of people expanding their capabilities beyond the ones that we might just do in this agency.
Yeah,
there is a frustration.
There is. And I was just going to say, we've met with a lot of leaders, Gus, and I can't remember who told us this, but they did say to us, you're always building your team for their next job. So if you kind of see it as that, you're always helping them grow. And it sounds like that's exactly what you're doing, Dan. That's the environment that you're creating.
There's an additional part to it as well. It's like after running it for the time that you run it, you start to see teams, you start to see relationships form, you start to see friends form. And it's an interesting thing. Like, I know that there are people that no longer work in this agency that are still friends, that have built lifelong friendships and lifelong relationships through the agency. Now, if I sit here and go, we weren't a little part of that, and I don't feel a little bit proud of that, then that's not cool. Like, I'm happy for all of those people that have built those relationships and made those friends and have these lifelong friendships and meetups and all that sort of stuff. And they do it, and it's wonderful, really wonderful, actually.
Yeah, it is a lovely work culture. Yeah.
It has changed, but it does change. Things do change. Circumstances and situations change, economies change, demand changes. But in reality, when I reflect back on all of the years that we've had, I know that there's intersections. I know that there's people that still talk about it and they think fondly on it. And I can only play a little part in that, and I'm proud of that.
Oh, that's wonderful. And if we were to ask you, about work culture, how would you yourself define what the best work culture is? How would you see what, in your eyes, in your opinion?
Ideal best work culture. I mean, we're living through really interesting times, right? So we've had COVID, we've had lockdowns, we've had to construct new working environments, we've had to work under very different circumstances, and through the process of working through those circumstances, it's opened up new ways of working. Now, I'm not the youngest guy in the industry, so for me, it's a little bit uncomfortable to watch or to work in the context of absolute flexibility. I've never quite found it that comfortable. I like to come to an office, maybe it's my age, but I have to work with people that want to work within that flexibility as well. So we do operate a flexible working environment. I'm not sure it's the ideal environment, especially when I love teamwork, when I love to see teams working together. I think it's important that people are in the environment that they can be in together when they're working on outcomes. It's hard. I find it hard to teams people in to work collaboratively, especially in design. And I'm sure you find this as well, Natalie, especially in design and creative thinking. It's team. The best stuff happens in workshops. I've got one behind me. It's hard to do that on a mirror.
So how do you bring that to your organization then, when your business required collaboration, engagement, beyond talking on the screen, where you can feel the emotion of ideas? And you mentioned that best working culture could be related to flexibility, but how do you balance that, removing the fact that you like it to be having that face-to-face?
Not an answer. I'm trying different things, Gus. I couldn't say I have an absolute answer. I'm experimenting. One of the things that I've experimented with in the past is I tried one of those working environments where you don't have an office. And that worked a little bit, especially in the midst of the COVID lockdowns. But one of the things that we've done recently is we've taken a really nice office, a much bigger space than we really need. And I'm trying to create a stimulating environment where people want to come. It's quite central. It's quite beautiful. It's got lovely views. Like, we've made the investment in an environment so that people could come and enjoy working together here. Now, what I'm seeing is people will then choose to come into the office, and they'll choose to work at home. There is, in the contracts that we have, they're actually flexible contracts. So there is a combination of the flexibility and the contact time. But I need to encourage, I need to stimulate, I can't enforce. So we need to work this way. But marketplaces change, dynamics change. 6 months ago, we were working in different market dynamics. 6 months later, working in a new market dynamic. I think as markets open up and people open up and there's more people looking for jobs, it might change again. We have to remain fluid. And one thing I've learned is nothing is certain, and you have to maintain that fluidity.
Yeah, even remaining on this topic, managing, especially high performance remotely, some are in the office, things like that. Would love to know, how do you actually manage this high performance with a team, but then, everyone's performing so highly, balancing burnout as well? How do, especially working remotely, you can't see how people are operating remotely. How do you actually balance this yourself as a leader?
Especially in your industry, where I know
absolutely
in your industry, people working night and day, like it's agency have that tendency.
Well. Agency life, right? Listen, the experience, one of the learnings early on when we were in those lockdowns and we were all working at home was you just could not do, and I'm sure, Gus, you experienced it as well, Teams meetings every hour on the hour and knocked out at the end of, at 59 minutes to, you're on to the next team meetings. It's at 0:00. Very difficult to work that way, especially in an industry where you need to stop, you need to think, and you need to be creative, which is why I think you end up with teams that are burning out, because they're working outside of those hours to do the thinking and to do the creative work that otherwise they should be doing during the day. So essentially, I guess the best way to handle it is minimize the amount of meetings that you're having, like organized meetings, and try and make the times that you intersect in those meetings as efficient as you can possibly make them. So that would probably be the advice around that, or the experience that we're having around it. But look, I don't have the answers. It's a very, very dynamic space right now, and we're all experiencing it, and this is very new. And so it just comes down to experimenting and finding what works for different people. But I do get frustrated, I'll be honest. You know, like I'm being of a slightly different generation, I like to know what's going on.
Yes.
I found... Sorry, guys.
Sorry, Natalie. Yeah, I
was
found
gonna
it
say,
the
this
same
is what
then.
you mean. You
Nat,
go,
you go
Gus.
first.
I am not. I finished. I'll take the next question.
Okay, I found it the same then. You know, I think it's funny when we talk about flexibility and people working from home. Organization is actually finding it challenging to understand what the impact working from home, because team meeting, for example, back-to-back team meeting, where people don't even have the time to walk, we underestimate the health benefit, even walking from one meeting room to the other and saying hello on the way, to switching from team to Zoom, back to team to Zoom to email. And then at the end of the day, you don't actually move from your chair. It's really creating burnout.
Yeah, I agree with that. The other thing that I think is missed is when you're working in an environment with other people, the conversations that you have in between those meetings are the meetings. So I don't need to have a 1 hour meeting on a particular topic. I can move between the 3 different topics that we're working on at the same time in the 5 minutes between conversations. It can be a very brief conversation. But the problem with this structured, and I'm a creative, right? We're strategic and creative. The brain doesn't work on a 15-minute or 1 hour schedule. It works on a ongoing schedule. It works in a different way. So it doesn't quite work. It doesn't work. I don't think it works for our environment. But like I said, I don't have the answers. We just keep experimenting until we find the solution that works for us.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, you know, I do, we write a lot of articles and things, and I used to find the best angles for stories, especially when you're working with an organization, in the lifts, you know, when you're having a chat to those people after you've, you know, caught the public transport, you're going up there, or the chats you had between meetings at the water cooler as you're, you know, refilling your bottles. We used to find the best stories or get the best updates for projects at those times. So to kind of trial and error what works now, contacting people via phone, or, you know, it's you're right. It's kind of trial and error, trying to work out what's the best way to replace what used to be the norm.
And what you're also touching on is how you create culture, like how you create ways of working and ways things are done, and embedding and imprinting that culture on people. Very difficult when you've got a new team. And I mean, I hired people in the lockdown, and I never physically met them for months. And then we met them. It was so weird. But it was wonderful too. But like when we met them, it was actually so uplifting as well in those instances. Anyway, that's the different conversations.
Oh, look, we could go on this forever. Like, you know, I always think about those people that you onboard for their first job ever during COVID. They've never, ever had that proper onboarding experience. And that to them is the norm. You know, it's really interesting. It's a whole topic in itself.
It is. And the responsibility of employment, like what it means to employ people and what it means to grow people into employment and create responsible adults out of younger people. So there's a whole other conversation there. But
absolutely. But Dan, I do want to ask, this is what I was going to ask before. Sorry, Gus. You know, you've had a great career, you know, over 20 years, you've got this great experience. What have you learned from your career to date that leaders of an organization perhaps should do, and then on the other end of the spectrum shouldn't do?
Well, I absolutely believe that you have to lead by example. You have to play a part in the delivery of everything that you work on. It's not about being I'm not a control freak. It's not about control of the process, but it's about presenting an example or presenting the way of which you should be working. So that means putting the hours in. It means turning up. It means putting in the extra time. It means creating and polishing off the work. It means presenting the work, but it also means stepping away. So there's also times when other people need to step up and they need to present the work, and you need to watch them go through that process. What I've learned recently is I cannot tell people how to do things. I just can encourage them. I can show them different ways from all the stuff that we've done in the years that we have. I can show them different ways that they could work, or different ways that we could communicate what it is that our ideas to people. But I can't actually tell them how to do that. That's the other thing about it. One other thing here is it's all about how you communicate ideas to people. It's how you impart the information and the knowledge. And not only do you need to worry about that with your clients, which is how do you make clients understand what it is that you're trying to present to them, or the ideas that you're trying to impart to them, but also to your own people, which is teaching them around the best way to communicate their ideas. Because ideas are really esoteric, and they're not real. They're just in your head. So it's how do you actually present a concept to somebody, and how do you take them on that journey, and how do you link all that up? So I've definitely learned about that, and I love to teach people through process and through the way that we do things, ways in which, or just consideration for how you actually communicate to people. That's definitely.
Great. So what is communication then? What is communication then in terms of your engagement? Like, I like the way you say it. You realize that we can't actually tell people how to do things. Instead, we can encourage them to complete the task in their own best way. It required a special skills to do that. Where do we start as a lead? Like, where do we start on this? Like, are you saying that I shouldn't tell Natalie how to cook noodles in my noodle shop? Instead, just give her the ingredients so she can cook it? Like, can you be more practical if we are talking about a noodle shop, for example, creating the best bowl of noodles?
GA's Noodles. At GA's Noodles, if GA wants to if GA wants someone to learn to cook noodles, the best way, Gus, is to show them how you do it, walk them through it, and show the passion for it. Like, you have passion for the way that you make those noodles. Imparting a little bit of that passion in the process of showing me will actually switch me on to make me more excited about making noodles, which is part of your storytelling. So I can't tell them this is the way to do it. I can passionately show them the way that we've done it before. And hopefully from that passion, they can get excited by what they see, and they can get engaged in what it is that we're presenting. And they can then see, maybe this is a way that we could present our work, or think about something, or play it out this way. There's lots to be learned, especially in the strategy, brand design, creative, communications world. Everything's a little bit different. There's so many different disciplines, but they all have the same words. That's the other thing about, in our world anyway. There's a strategist, there's a designer, there's a creative. But some designers, they actually focused on creating the craft of brand design. Others are focused on the craft of advertising design. Others are focused on the craft of the art of communication. So it's very different. Everyone has very different skills, and it's really around looking at those skills and connecting them all up.
Thank you.
That's great. Look, we've touched on branding, and I want to kind of move the conversation towards that way. But before we do, Dan, so that the audience understands exactly what we mean by branding, because you said, there's different definitions for different things. Can you tell us all, what is branding in the most simplest terms, please?
Okay. I would actually ask the question, what is a brand? And then we'll talk about branding.
Okay.
So everything is sort of compartmentalizes into little pieces. So a brand is really an idea that's held in someone's mind. It's classically been trained to me that a brand is a concept that's held in someone's mind. It's not what I'm going to tell you it is as the owner of that brand. It's literally what you're going to think it is. So therefore, it's a perception that's held in that mind. So it's something that you own, not something that I own. So as a perception held in someone's mind, it comes to life through all the experiences, touch points, and impressions that people have from you over time. So the more that they interact with you, the more that they build up a perception of who and what you are. What's really important to know is that everything communicates. Everything that you say and do and behave with will execute an impression in someone's head about who and what you are, and form out over time and a perception of you and your brand. And note that I'm saying you and your brand, because you as a personality creates that through everything that you do in your life. So as a personal brand, you're also creating that perception in people's minds. So there's different ways that you can play this out. So that's the definition of branding. There's different ways that I can explain that as well. What I found is that you can do this really easily with an example, right? What I find is I ask this question of many people, and I always get a very similar response, and that's what great branding is. So if I ask you, Gus, what's the first image you have in your head when you hear this word? The very first thing comes in your mind. Not the second, not the third, the first flash before you try and rationalize it. You hear this word, what do you see? Frog.
Green.
What's it?
I was going to say the same thing.
Sorry?
Surprise.
Yeah.
Same thing. So you see a frog you see a green frog in your head, right? So I did some research many years ago, and I found there's about 5,700 species of frogs in the world, and most of them are brown. But whenever I ask this question, everybody in their head sees a green tree frog. And so to me, a really great analogy for brand. It's the perception that we own that while frogs in the main are brown, we all think that frogs are green tree frogs. When's the last time you saw a frog?
To be frankly honest, I saw it a month and a half ago when my dog had a frog in his mouth.
Oh, really?
So it's brown.
And it was brown.
It's brown.
So why is it that people all think that frogs are green when in fact most of them are brown?
We blame it on Sesame Street.
We place in Sesame Street, right? So what it is all the conversations and communications and impressions that we've had over time about frogs keep telling us that they're green, whether it's Kermit, whether it's the Princess and the Frog, whether it's conversations about the environment. Everything reinforces that frogs are green, which forces us to have a first-to-mind image of the frog brand being a green tree frog. And so that is a perception we own, but it's not the fact. It's not the truth. The truth is most of them are brown, and they're not all that cute. But what it also says is that our perception is the reality, and a brand is a perception that's held in somebody's mind. So the way that you build that perception is, like I said, through impressions and experiences that you form and deliver consistently through what you look like, what you say, and what you do, and everything that you do. So that look like, and do.
I have a question just into that, and I'm not sure whether I bring this question too far to what Natalie asked, what's a brand? So when you ask me, when you say frog, in that split second, I actually picture a green frog, believe it or not. Like I actually picture a green frog. Now, what would happen? And then you say majority of frog are brown, not green. So if frog is a type of a business, and people perception are all green, and I want to have a business that is brown, how do I shift that? So I just open a new company, a small business, right? Let's just generalize the business is called frog, where people understand frog as green, but I know for well frog is brown. How do I create the initial business to make sure that it's not green? I'm so special that I'm brown, which is the real frog.
Interesting question. I think you've got to look at two things you're asking me there. One is you're in the category that you're playing in, the frog category, is generally green. So when you think of brands in certain categories, they all have like a category language. They all have like a style or a visual cue or a photography or a thing that they say. Like think about ice cream, right? When you're buying an ice cream, it comes in a tub, and that tub generally has a picture of the ice cream on it. And it's generally round or it's plastic and it comes from the freezer.
Yeah.
Now, if you said to me, you know what, you got this new ice cream and it's not kept in the freezer and it comes in a box, right? Would the customer that you want to impress that on believe you? Would they literally go to a different part of the cabinet to buy a different part of the shop? So in a way, sometimes you need to work within category norms. Sometimes you need to work within category.
Good point.
Sometimes you want to make sure that you're selling ice cream because there's an expectation of ice cream. So one of the things I've said in the past, some of the idioms is expect the expected. So you want to deliver on your promise and you want to deliver what's expected to the consumer, because ultimately what you're trying to achieve is success at a business level. You're not trying to buck the system, create a massive change. I'm not trying to be conservative, but when it comes to small businesses, most small businesses are operating in currently in a red ocean, in areas where the category is quite mature, whether it's a noodle shop or it's a burger shop or it's a dental or it's a dentist. If you go into a new dentist, if you go into a dentist and he goes, I've got a completely new technique, I'm not going to use a drill, I'm going to use my hands. You might be right, but how do you feel about that?
Yes. Okay. That's a good. You are absolutely right. Yes. Okay.
And
So
Dan, you mentioned. Sorry.
That's right, Natalie. Go on.
I was going to say, you mentioned brand itself separate to branding. If you were to define then branding itself for our audience, is that different again?
Yeah. So branding is the management of all of the expressions and impressions that you have. The first is the definition, which is what is it you are? Are you a frog? The next is what is it that frogs do? Which becomes what you look like, what you say, and what you do over time, which is how you create those impressions. So one is about like creating the absolute model of the idea of who and what you are. And the other is rolling it out and executing it consistently over and over and over again, so that you build up a very strong perception of who and what you are. And so this is the example of coffee, Gus, that I think I've told you before. Gus doesn't like coffee, Natalie, but we like coffee.
I love coffee. So I'll understand this, yeah.
And when you go to coffee, Natalie, do you go to the same coffee shop you've got a regular coffee shop you go to?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. And they make good coffee there, right?
That's exactly why I go. Yeah, perfect amount of chocolate in my mocha as well.
Fabulous. Now you invite me over and I come to that coffee shop, and that day happens to be the day that the barista isn't feeling that great. And he makes a coffee and it's not a good coffee, and I have that coffee. You have a bad coffee. What would you say? No, I made a bad coffee today. I'll be back tomorrow, right? But me, it's the first coffee I'm having from him. You say to me, I say to you, this is a terrible coffee. I'm never coming back here again, right? So that's because there's no brand equity for me in the relationship between that coffee shop and the coffee that's being made. Where for you, there's a bank of brand equity that's been built over time. All the great coffees and great conversations that you've had with that barista, who makes that great coffee and puts just the perfect amount of chocolate on your mocha, has built up in your head a perception that this guy makes great coffee and it's really worthwhile. But then I go there and I experience the one day that he makes bad coffee in the last 7. And I turn around and I go, I'm never going to go to this coffee shop. They don't know how to make coffee at all, because there's no brand equity for me to roll back on. And that's because the coffee shop has been delivering to you a consistent visual, verbal, and emotional, or satisfying the visual, verbal, behavioral, and emotional outcomes of his brand for you. He's delivering on his promise, which is good coffee. And you can lean back on the fact that it's not a good coffee today. But I can't. I don't have that equity. I don't have that relationship. So I'll never go back. And it's very, very similar in business. And it's very meaningful for small business. And that's branding. That's the management of the brand in market through everything you do, what you look like, what you say, and how you operate, and what you deliver your customers in a consistent and ongoing manner. And often it's very difficult, especially as you get into bigger companies. It's actually really easy for a small company. You just have to make good coffee. But in really big companies, it's really hard to manage that, because you've got hundreds of people and sometimes thousands of people that aren't actually going to deliver on that promise. So it becomes really complicated. So actually brand in small business isn't that hard. It's around understanding who you are, who you're for, what your product is, why you make it, and then delivering it consistently and over and over and over again. That's the branding element of it. The first is the branding. Just gets really hard.
So
big companies.
Yeah. So what you're saying in the context, I like this frog thing because now it's stick in my head. Brand is green. So brand is the fact that frog is green. That's brand. Branding is to show up every day as a green frog, because the brand is green. You show up with brown, black, yellow. People get disconnect between your brand and the branding.
Absolutely. Yes. So that's exactly correct. So the first is who and what you are, which is a green tree frog. The other is being a frog.
Being a frog. Yes. Yes.
So then, Dan, with this in mind, how important is branding to small and medium businesses?
Well, it's fundamental because they're doing it anyway. Everything is brand because every impression you're creating on every customer that walks through the door is the opportunity to build an impression, to build on that perception, to create more of a bank of equity so that if something goes wrong, everything will be okay. So that you do get recommendations, so you do get referrals, so you do get people coming back. And none of this costs money. This has nothing to do with money. This just has to do with showing up and doing the job. But being
sorry,
clear.
can we stop there, Dan? Because this is something that I want to ask. So when we bring you in, I'm sure the audience, including myself, when we're talking about branding, it just sounds expensive. And you just said before my question that branding is showing up consistently to who you are in your services, and it costs no money. Can you just come back 2 steps and really focus on this? Because I thought we want to ask all the SME all over the world to start spending money to find a brand consultant here, and what you're saying is brand costs no money.
You can brand consulting, Gus. That's fine, because what brand consulting does is it helps to define the frog. Okay, because sometimes it's very difficult, especially when you're inside your own head, right? They say it's very difficult to do your own brain surgery. So here it's like, it's very difficult to get a look in the mirror and get a full understanding and image of who and what it is that you want to be, what sort of frog you are. Very difficult, even for me. So it helps to get someone else to go and find out things for you, feed them back to you, and help you step through that process. But once it's defined, it has to be delivered in a consistent and ongoing manner, which moves into the branding elements of it. And then when we talk about marketing, we're actually talking about acquisition. That's about getting more people to come. So we'll push that over there. But if I just go back to the beginning, if you sit and you think about who is your customer, who is your audience, who is it that you want to sell your product to, what else is out there that they can choose that's similar to you, and why they should choose you, then at the center of that is your proposition to them. So let me go through that again. Who's your customer? Let's say the coffee shop. Customer is people that like coffee, right? What other options are available to them? Well, we live in Sydney in Australia, and there are thousands of coffee shops, but a lot of it has to do with convenience, and a lot of it has to do with reliability. So it has to be about proximity. So I want customers who are near my building where I've placed my coffee shop, right? So one is the customer is people who drink coffee. The second is the competitive market that I operate in, which is what other coffee shops sit around us. Like how many other options are available. And then the third is, why should they come to me? Why us? And that's going to be a combination of different things. For a coffee shop, it's going to be a combination of the bean. It's going to be a combination of the flavor. It's going to be a combination of the people making it, the friendliness of the staff, the quality of the service, the look and feel of the location, all the other elements that make up what it is going to be. And then from that proposition, you need to deliver over and over and over and over and consistently over and over again, which becomes the branding element. Now, if I tell you wanted to market that, marketing is then, once I've defined all of that, I want to go tell everybody in the building that we're here at the bottom of the building, ready to take your order. So you might create a whole lot of marketing attached to that. You might create an intensive campaign for the people in your building and around the area to say, come try our coffee, which is the first experience they have with it, where they've got no brand equity. So it better be a really good coffee. And then if you deliver a really good coffee, a couple of them might come back and go, you know what, they make good coffee and they were nice to me. And then they'll keep coming back because I'll keep delivering consistently. And then the machine switches on, and the momentum builds, and the perpetuality of the service continues. We can do it with your.
So are you saying to us and our audience, because even for me, the word branding, brand, marketing, it's so close together, but now you explain it this way, it's actually very different. What you're saying is, before you thinking about how to market your services, before you're talking about spending effort in marketing, in the absence of your core DNA of brand, and then showing up to have a good branding, this spending on marketing For example, let's move from coffee. I don't drink coffee. I want to eat. I love noodles, so I have a noodle shop by the name of GA Noodle, Gustav Arianto Noodles. What you're saying is it's pointless for me to spend hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars in sending flyers, social media about GA Noodles if I don't even consistently show up or providing services, food, outcome that is consistent to the noodles that I want to produce itself. Because people come and then they never come back.
Yeah, it's a combination of that. And then also, marketing is an interesting one, because marketing is when you start to spend the money on reaching people. It costs money to reach people, whether it's Google, it's Google ads, or it's Facebook ads, or it's advertising in a newspaper or a TV commercial. When you start to go out into market like that and it starts to cost money, there's a lot of wastage. And that waste happens because you're communicating to people that don't like noodles or don't like coffee. So let's say I spent all my money focused on my coffee shop, focused on you guys. And you look at my ad and you go, that's great, but I only like tea and they don't do tea. You'll never come. That means I've wasted my marketing money. So it's very, very important that you understand who your customer is. And the next part of that is where I'm going to find that customer. And then the third part of that is how I'm going to reach that customer, what channels I'm going to use, and how much I want to spend to reach that customer. And so again, that doesn't cost anything to get through, but it does cost you when you start spending the money on marketing. And that's what I'm saying about branding. It doesn't cost anything. Defining your brand doesn't really cost anything for small business. You just have to sit and think about it, talk to some customers, understand your audience, understand what makes you different, understand how you compete, and then write that down into a value proposition if you like. Why is it that people should come and drink my coffee, eat my noodles? What is it about me? And then from that, you then deliver that every day, which is the quality of the product that you're delivering. And then you talk about marketing, which is how you're going to reach new people so they can experience these great noodles that you're promising me, because they do sound yum, because you've made them sound yummy.
Yeah. And, you know, when we talk about branding, even like when I'm speaking of the coffee scenario, Dan, you know, what comes to mind is, you know, you go to a coffee shop and you may have been there once or twice only before, but when you return on your third time, the barista remembers your name and your order. And that, just that little thing, it's kind of, you know, it really is them delivering. And you're right, it doesn't cost anything. To me, I'm not good with remembering names, so it'll be quite hard. But just that additional step and what it does and how much value it adds to the customer on the other end.
Yep, because everybody's involved in delivering the brand experience.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. I mean, one of the other ways to look at it is this. When you've got an existing brand, when it comes to life, what it looks like is what you're defining in the definition of who and what you are is not only who and what you are today, but it's also slightly a vision for the future, which is I want to have 15 coffee shops, or I just want to have this one. Let's say I want to have 15, or GA Noodles wants to have 15 GA Noodles around the city. So like that's a really big vision from one noodle shop to 15. So in that aspiration, you really need to define where you are today, what people think of you today, if that GA Noodles has been around for a while, and then what you're going to do to meet the aspiration. And inside that tension between who you are today and where you want to be is probably change. And that's when we start talking about things like brand identity and logo and name. So yes, on all the other stuff, if you're just running one little location and one business, everything's okay because you're in control and you're delivering on it. But if your aspiration is to grow your business, it's to get bigger than the location that you're at, to have 3, 5, 10, to be a plumbing service or a carpentry business with 50 carpenters across the state and different locations, or a franchise, then you have to talk about where are you now and where do you want to be in the future, and how can that brand enable that growth? Because ultimately it's done through change. So Gus, if GA Noodles was your great-grandfather's business and we were going to take GA Noodles and we were going to take it to from the east to the west, and we're going to have all of them, how would we do that in a way that A, delivers a quality product, and B, communicates all the benefits of the GA Noodles experience? So some of the benefits of the GA Noodles experience, because it's your great-grandfather's, and I'm just guessing, right? Because, You don't.
I don't have noodle shop, by the way. It's example, but I wish I have one.
But if you did, and it was your great grandfather's noodle shop, then after 75 years, I would think that the 75 years of experience of making noodles means something. So I want to leverage that attribute. I want to take that attribute and I want to talk about that, which might turn up in something you might say about the brand, which is 75 years of experience can't go wrong. Best noodles in Sydney. We're bringing the best noodles from Marrickville to Penrith, or we're bringing them from, Penrith to Bondi. And we're taking attributes of that story and we're making that promise in market. And so at that level, you might go, okay, how do we best express that? Is that best expressed through the words GA Noodles because it's got the 75 years? Maybe. Is it best expressed through the logo that your grandfather drew on a piece of paper in 1903?
Yeah.
Maybe not. And that's when you might change your logo. That's when you might implement change. Because when you bring change about, you're actually starting a new conversation with your audience. Yeah. You're starting to tell them something.
You know what's interesting then? I have a friend, not to name this person. He owns a small business. And every time I meet with this person, there is always something wrong that you want to change. One day he talked about logo. One day he said, oh, maybe I don't spend enough time on marketing. One day he talked about branding. One day. So in your experience, can you correct me if I'm wrong here? What you're saying is, before you spend anything, the fact that let's just use GA Noodles is a noodle shop that's been around for 70 years, started with my great-grandfather, that I inherited now, that I don't like the logo because the logo is relevant in 1920, not today. What you're saying is, before just suddenly have the urge to change the logo to make it relevant in 2022, is come back to the green frog, the frog situation, understanding what's the color, what do we want to show up, what's the customer, where do we want to bring this, and then we start working on that instead of just by feeling, I think we don't sell noodles because the logo relevant in 1920.
Yeah, but there's things about this that are exciting, right? That you can't flush away, that you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater here. 75 years ago in the 1920s. So what have you got? It's 2022. What is a physical act? What's a truth point about that brand? And the truth about that brand is that it's got 70 plus years experience. It's got heritage. Heritage means something. So you don't want to throw that heritage away because that's proof, that's evidence. And what can you do with that? What can you do with that heritage? From that heritage, you can deliver a benefit, and that benefit is authenticity. And when it comes to how you differentiate GA Noodles and its 75 years in the market, it's got to be done through that authenticity, because that authenticity delivers me, your customer, an emotional feeling, a reward, a sensibility, could be an experience, which is like, that authenticity turns up as an experience. And then you can say, who are you, Gus, that delivers an experience like this, an authentic experience? Maybe you're passionate, maybe you're real, maybe you're hands-on. And that's a person as a brand. And then what's important to that person that's real, passionate, and hands-on? Maybe it's quality, maybe it's consistency, maybe it's flavor. And then from those attributes and feelings and characteristics, you've actually built the model of your brand, the idea, the frog. And then you look at it and you go, should we change the logo? And you go, you know what? The 20s logo needs a little bit of a tweak because we're going to take it into Bondi and we're going to go meet the hipsters because that's where the customers are and they're all hipsters now. But we're going to take all that authenticity and that story to Bondi. And it might even be successful because hipsters love all this stuff. Then we change it, but we don't massively change it, right? We might change a little bit of it. We might make it, we might embed. There you go. That's how you define your frog.
Yeah.
So really, they shouldn't be changing. Businesses should not be changing their logos or brand on the fly. That's really what it is. It's take a step back and see whether you're actually benefiting the business or you're costing yourself the heritage and all this experience that you already have.
Yeah, potentially, if that's valuable.
Yeah.
So rather than going, today I'm going to change the logo, you're not actually changing the logo, you're creating change.
Yeah.
And what does change communicate? It communicates change. It's inconsistency. You want to deliver consistently. So it's really around having a strong definition of who and what you are, translating that into behaviors, into visuals, into the look, the feel, and the behaviors of the business, and then consistently delivering that until that's no longer relevant. And when it's losing relevance, you go back to the beginning, who and what you are, who's the customer, are they still finding this relevant? And then you connect all that back up. So you just keep going on that loop. Keep thinking about who's your customer, how you compete, why people are choosing you. You might be losing customers today because there's a new cafe or there's a new noodle shop. And the old noodle shop's lost relevance because the new one's catching all my customers. So you have to look at that because the marketplace changes. And so you might have to change something contextual to that marketplace. Maybe you'll do that through marketing. Maybe you'll do that through branding. But you have to think about all these things. You don't just need to rush into it. That's the beautiful thing. You always have a bit more time.
It does make a lot of sense. And Dan, from your experience, over 20 years, so we're really asking you all these tough questions. Are there common mistakes that businesses make with their brand or their branding? Are there some, let's say, 5 common mistakes that you can share with us so we know not to make those same mistakes as them?
I think the first thing is clarity of purpose. So it's very clear. So I'm going to talk about clarity, actually. It's clarity of purpose. It's being sure about what you are and why you do what you do. That's the first. So why are you making these noodles? Why is this important? So clarity of purpose. The next is clarity of audience, which is who am I doing this for? Because if the audience change, if the purpose changes and the audience changes, then you are no longer connecting with a market. And if you're not connecting with the market, no matter how much money you spend, there's no market. So you're not going to make any money. That's the first. The first is clarity of purpose. The second is clarity of audience. The third is clarity of offer. Well, what is it that I'm selling? Is it noodles? And what happens if we start selling sandwiches? Like, how will that make sense if we take the 75 years of experience and heritage and authenticity and we embed that into white bread? It's not going to work. So there's clarity of purpose, clarity of audience, clarity of offer. Then once you've got all of that clarity, it's consistency of delivery. And then finally, it's the fact that you do also need to pivot when you need to. So they're probably the 5 things.
No, that does make sense. I was even thinking, I was going to ask the question, but now I kind of have to think differently about it because and we've had this before in comments from our audience where they don't like social media. And does branding cover social media? But judging by what you've said now, social media would be more the marketing side of a brand, if I'm correct.
Yeah, marketing, but you're still taking your brand into that market.
Yeah.
Through the channel. So that's about reach, right? So the brand itself comes to life through channels. That's where you're making your offer known, your presence known, and your proposition known. So yeah, they need to use different channels, but but that's all about marketing, is all about reach, and it's all about growing customers. So when you go into social media, you're very much trying to establish an awareness of the brand amongst a certain audience. And so therefore the same rules apply. What's the purpose? Who you're trying to reach? And what's your offer? And then you're in market.
Yeah.
So if we were to say, if we were to look...
Sorry, Nat, you go.
I was going to say, if we were to look at it then, if we were to look at the risks of a small or medium business that aren't focusing on brand, if they're not going to look at it, they don't have time for it, or they're just so busy and because business owners are really time poor, and maybe they've started their business and they've got an influx of clients and they're working 80-hour weeks and they're doing everything themselves. They don't have time to look at their brand. They just do, go. What would be your advice to our listeners that are in that situation at the moment? They haven't focused on brand. They've started their business, they've launched their business, and they're just working 80-hour weeks, trying to build this business. What's your advice?
That's tough. But my advice here is that you're already creating brand. Because everything communicates, you're already communicating something to your customer. So you already are creating brand in their mind, because ultimately it's a perception in their mind. And if they keep coming back, they're coming back because of something. Your 80-hour weeks aren't in vain, because something is happening as a consequence of that. So I guess the stock take opportunity is to go ask those customers, what is it about you that's attractive? What is it about you that satisfies me right now? And how can I use that information to ensure that I'm going to be able to scale this brand against these audiences? So they're the things to think about there. So the reality is you heard it already.
It's funny when I heard, it's Natalie, when I cut you off, I actually I want to ask the same question. So back to the situation, if I'm a noodle shop owner and I've been working, what's the danger not actually stop and think to understand my brand? And then your answer is actually, I quite like it then. Well, whatever we do is communicated as a brand to the other side. And maybe the answer is just never been lazy to ask our customer why they keep coming back, and actually really see whether we still be consistent, becoming the green frog, because that's what people believe. Instead of trying to become
something, right? They like something. So what is it they like? And then from that, you will get your audience, your offer, and your purpose. Because you look at the audience, because they'll tell you why they come. They'll look at your offer and they'll say, because you're cheap, we love the noodles, the flavor's amazing. And that'll clarify purpose, which could be your authenticity. Because we just love GA noodles because of the 70 years of them doing it.
Yeah.
See what I mean?
And the danger what you said is, if I not knowing why people come back. Because if people come back because of the 70 years, and the first thing I did is changing the logo, try to make it fresh just for 1 year, then people stop coming back. Because they might ask why they come.
They might lose you. You might be lost in their mind. Because right now you're building a place inside their mind. It's creating relevance and they're coming back. So you don't want to lose that relevance. You want to maintain that relevance. So you do need to ask your customers, what is it about you? What do they like about you? What's important about you? Why are you a priority for them? These are good problems. These are all good problems.
An interesting way to look at it. Definitely interesting. And Gus, I'm actually going to hand over to you because we've run out of time and we could ask you so many more questions about brand and branding and marketing and all different things, Dan. So Gus, I'm going to hand it over to you for a wrap up because we've run out of time.
Yeah, thank you, Natalie. And once again, Dan, thank you for your time to share your thought on a very important topic. Normally when I have to wrap up, I come up with a lot of statement on this, but I'm so in tune with what you say that I just realized I can't do two things. I can't write and think, because there's a lot of things that I thought I knew I did not know. So let me try to wrap up and give some of the summary. Start from the leadership. You mentioned to us that for you, leadership is simply being a team and part of a team who can facilitate the environment so all the team can do, learn, and grow together. We can boost our culture by accepting that flexibility is important for everyone.
Yeah.
As a leader, we need to lead by example, not being a control freak. Then you also mentioned, you realize that we can't tell people how to do things. Instead, we can encourage them to complete the task by showing them how to do it and let them put their flavor and passion to reach to the outcome. Then we move to branding. You ask me what comes up in my mind with a frog, and no joke, when you ask that question, a green frog comes out inside my mind, which is equally to Natalie, a green color. I did not realize until you asked 1 minute later, what is the color of most frogs, which is brown. So we soon learn that brand, it's the idea held in your mind. Branding is the consistency that we do to show up so the idea become a reality. Then you also talk about how do we create a successful branding, and what's the area that we need to do. We need to have a clarity of purpose in your business. we need to have a clarity of audience. Just because we open a noodle shop, in the absence of understanding who's the audience around the proximity of our shop, will kill the business and the brand itself. You need to have a clarity of offer, understanding what exactly you're offering, and then you need to wrap all that by consistency of delivery, and then at the same time ready to pivot when your brand is being exhausted, that the business are changing, the environment are changing, your audience are changing. Then you need to pivot and come back to square one by sitting down. Do not be lazy in stop and think and ask your customer, ask your audience what they like about you. Because if you're still in business today, doesn't matter how small, if you have one customer, 100 or 1,000, the reason they come back to you is because you have a successful brand and branding. Dan, thank you so much. I hope I wrapped your insight correctly.
Pretty good. That's very, very good. Especially given we were having a very big conversation. So I don't even know when you wrote any of that down.
That was very good. Thank you so much, Dan. I've learned a lot, and I'm sure all our audience have as well. So thank you so much.
No worries. Thanks, Natalie. Lovely to meet you.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for tuning in. For more information on Leader Talk and for some great resources to help your business grow, check out brainiact.com.au. Bye everyone.